obviously, we're all being quarantined by the coronavirus, and we're fine. We're fine.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine.
So, welcome to the first episode of History Happens. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Kaley Hunter, and today we're going to be talking about the world's deadliest diseases throughout history, and we're going to try to compare them to the coronavirus. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notifications if you want. Without further ado, let's jump right into this video. The first plague that we're going to be talking about is the Antoine Plague. This occurred between 165 AD and 180 AD. And then a second outbreak occurred in 251 to 266. This was, they thought, more of like a bubonic plague, but there weren't any confirmations on that for sure. It originated in China, or the Silk Road. They estimate there were about 2,000 deaths per day, and during the second outbreak, there were about 5,000 deaths per day. The symptoms were fever, diarrhea, vomiting, thirstiness, swollen throat, and coughing. The second plague is the Plague of Justinian, which happened between the years of 541 and 750. That's a really long time. That's 225 years of this disease to be going on. And it really went on in the city of Constantinople. I think that's how you say it. Again, if I'm wrong, correct me, please. But it swept through the Mediterranean for 225 years, but it originated in Egypt. The black rat, another rat problem. The grain ships and carts that were from Egypt went to Alexandria and Palestine, and they spread this disease all the way into the Byzantine Empire. And southern Italy actually recorded during this time that the weather was really off. They had snow and ice and frost in the middle of the summer, and there was a food shortage, and so the people were moving from different region to region because there was no food. There really was nothing to live off of, and the rats went with them, and so thus they spread this disease. There are three types that they think that this might have been. It could have been the bubonic plague, or the pneumonic, or the septimic. The actual records estimated that there was about 10,000 deaths per day, but historians think that there is actually probably around 5,000 deaths per day, which is still a lot. That's a lot of people. To put that in comparison, coronavirus right now, today, March 25th, has killed 20,800 something. I'll have to check that number. But that's a lot of people. This has been going on for 2 months, it seems, and 10,000 a day and 5,000 a day, that's a huge number. The symptoms actually were a little weird for this one. There was delusions, nightmares, fever, swelling. They would lapse into comas, and they suffered for days, which is really weird. I don't know how they compare that to the bubonic plague exactly, because this is more of a mental health disease, I think, than anything. It's a lot like the story of the dancing disease. In Germany, there was a disease where people would dance themselves to death. They could not stop dancing for some reason. And they thought that they were either mentally insane, they thought, this is spiritual something, or they thought it was hot blood. They thought that they were mentally insane and that their brain was overheating. So weird symptoms for this disease, but it was for 225 years. It's a really long time. The Black Plague, or the bubonic plague, or the Black Death, sorry. From 1346 to 1350, this was huge. They summarized that this killed, this is where the controversy comes in, this specific plague killed between 25 million and 200 million. That's a pretty big gap, I want to say. So, draw your conclusions. People think it goes from 25 to 200. You know, this originated in Italy from the rats from the Black Sea and the fleas and all that, similar to the Justinian plague, but obviously this was much more deadly. It actually, fun fact, it took 200 years for the population to restore to what it had been previously to this disease. But the symptoms, I mean, I recently saw a man on like Bing Imagers or something who actually caught the bubonic plague in 2003. Oh my gosh, it was a little scary. And I'll try to find the picture and link it down in the description below, but notice it's really graphic. You know, it's pretty scary. But the symptoms were lymph nodes that would swell and then turn black, and then black sores all over the body caused by internal hemorrhage, internal bleeding, known as buboes. And you'd have a raging fever and joint pains, which is why I am a little confused on why they thought the Justinian plague was a bubonic plague, because the symptoms are pretty different, actually. Their bodies would turn black. In the picture that I saw, there were veins that were like purple running up his face, and his neck was just basically gone. And you could tell he was in a lot of pain. Definitely some different symptoms going on there, and why that plague got its name of the Black Death. So 30 to 75 of the infections were actually fatal, but it was about 72 hours that you would have symptoms and die. So it was a pretty big percentage, but a pretty quick time period. It was not uncommon to see carts on the streets full of corpses that would just carry them. And once they had the graves, you know, they would make plague piles of people because there was nowhere to store as many corpses and individuals and bodies. Like you just couldn't store them anywhere. So they would have to either have mass graves or, you know, burn it. Fun fact, weird fact. So my fun fact, weird fact for today is Henry VIII. We all know of him. We all know of him. Don't really admire him. Don't really despise him. He was kind of weird. But there was this sickness going around called the sweating sickness. It was 1528 when this was going on. Henry VIII slept in a different bed every night for that summer. Not like that, yes, in a way, because he had 6 wives and plenty of mistresses, but he literally would switch beds and rooms and refused to see most of his staff that thought that they had it. He actually refused to see his mistress at the time, Anne Boleyn, for a full year because he was so terrified of this sickness and thought that they needed to stay away because she also thought that she had symptoms. It began in 1485. There was no warning. It was not preventable at all. Headache, neck pains, weakness, cold, sweat, fever, heart palpitations, and dehydration. So the first few symptoms are, you know, headache. Okay, we all get those. Neck pains, weakness, cold sweat. It kind of escalated from there. 30 to 50% of people died in 3 to 18 hours. I understand why he was terrified for his life. All of a sudden, in 1551, it just disappeared. It was the last epidemic, and it just kind of deteriorated. And scientists still don't really know what the cause was, what the origin was, and what it could be classified as. It was kind of a mystery sickness, and it still is. No one really knows what was going on during that time. However, it was definitely something that Henry VIII was afraid of, and rightfully so. Okay, so the next one that we're going to be talking about is smallpox. This has a lot of controversy as far as the dates go. The first site that I saw said 1520 it started, but then as I did some research, it actually might have originated in the 3rd century BC. Smallpox is a little scary. It's nothing that you want to tangle with. It's scary. doesn't look very fun at all. They estimate about 56 million people died, and this was a worldwide epidemic. But also, the first vaccine was created to, you know, get rid of this, essentially. In the 4th century AD, China caught this mysterious thing. Or at least we think, because it was rumored that they thought that they had it, but it wasn't exactly confirmed. I mean, it's the 4th century. Come on, guys. And then in the 7th century, the Arabic expansion of this time kind of spread it throughout Spain, Portugal, and Africa, northern Africa, because of the Silk Road. And then in the 11th century AD, the Crusaders, obviously coming in contact with northern Africa, spread it to Europe. And, I mean, at that point, I feel like once you've spread a sickness to Europe, you're kind of done for. The rest of the world is, hands down, definitely done for, because in the 16th century, it was imported to South America with all of the explorations going on in the 1500s. And in the 17th century, it was imported to North America! Yay! See what I mean? As soon as you get it to Europe, you're kind of done for. And then in the 18th century, the British decided to import it to Australia. So it was a kind of vast time era of spreading this disease. It didn't happen very quickly. It kind of happened slowly but surely. 3 of 10 people who caught this died. So it wasn't huge, but at the same time, it wasn't something to be messed around with. The survivors of this terrible disease were left with awful, awful scars. And if you look up pictures of smallpox, it's really sad. You know, you think teenagers have acne problems, which we do, but not as bad as smallpox. Actually, Queen Elizabeth I, Henry VIII's daughter, caught smallpox in her mid-20s and was stuck with scars on her face the rest of her life, and she covered it up with lead makeup and mercury lipstick. And by the end of her life, she was rumored to have about 1 inch thick of her mercury white powder on her, or her lead white powder on her face, because of skin deterioration and to cover up her wrinkles and to cover up her smallpox that put a damper on her in her life so early. The symptoms were pretty minimal. You got a fever, you got a rash, and then you had sores. You know, and these sores, it was minimal, sure, but it was not visually minimal. It was very clear when someone caught smallpox. And like I said earlier, the first vaccine for this was created in 1796. However, it was not fully accepted until about the mid-1800s, and it was not fully deteriorated until about 1855. Y'all thought the bubonic plague in the medieval times that was it. It was all done. Yeah, Black Death, moving on. No, it's back again. This time in the 1600s, 1665 to be precise. And this is where the terrifying bird mask doctors come in. We already know the symptoms, what it was like, how terrible it was, so I'm just going to get into the details of what went down. But people who caught this were basically sealed death. Families would paint a red cross on their door, signifying "Lord have mercy on us," when someone in their house caught it, because the rest of them were bound to die, basically. In the nighttime, there would be a cart that would come around and they would yell out, "Bring your dead out." And carts would just collect people of dead, and then they would go and put them in plague pits outside of that city that they were all in. And actually, Ring Around the Rosies, as some of you may know, originated from this time. The children's song. The one that we all sang when we were 5. Ashes, ashes, we all fall down. That's people dying. But they think that this came back because of a box of laundry. Box of laundry that was infested with fleas and brought to a small village in England. And there was colder weather that helped kind of kill off the fleas during the fall, because this happened during the summertime. But the Great Fire of 1666 of London really did quite a deal with killing off the rats and the fleas and that infestation. But again, this was all over Europe. This was not just England. This was definitely a big deal. It was a second plague. Going back to the beaked masks, the doctors would actually stuff smelly good stuff inside, like herbs and different things like that inside the beaks of that mask, because, I mean, at that point, there's just dead bodies everywhere. That smell is not going to be great, and you have to cure the people that are alive in the midst of the dead. So these doctors would go around and they would try to cover up the stench with herbs and different plants, different things like that, and also try to protect themselves. They usually had a stick where they would try to point at things because they didn't want to touch anything, because they obviously didn't want to get sick. I wouldn't want that either. But it's a little bit more terrifying now, looking back on all the pictures. It's estimated that actually not many doctors wore that. It's kind of an overall stamp on what these doctors wore. We don't know for sure if all these doctors actually wore this attire of giant cloak looking like the Grim Reaper type deal going on. But, you know, during this 17th century plague, Isaac Newton actually was sent home because the University of Cambridge, which he was studying at, shut down and sent everybody home, kind of like this coronavirus. But during this time, he actually made his greatest discoveries. He made calculus. Thanks for that, dude. He also helped develop optics and gravity. The next flu that we're going to be talking about is the Spanish flu of 1918. Now, I listened to an entire podcast concerning really this and comparing it to the coronavirus, because this was really the last big pandemic that the U.S. had, that the U.S. experienced, that we had to quarantine. So it was influenza. Influenza now is not nearly as bad. For example, I had influenza 3 weeks ago? 4 weeks ago? And I'm obviously here. But it happened in 1918. 1918 was the end of World War I. However, the countries that were involved and participating in this war agreed not to talk about it because there were deaths and they didn't want to get, the war was going on. They didn't really want to rub this disease in to make citizens more worried about what was going on. However, it is called the Spanish flu. But Spain wasn't really heavily impacted as much as we think. Spain was a neutral country in World War I. And so obviously they were able to report about this disease that was going on. But because they were able to report, people thought that, they had been hit. They were the worst that had been hit. It was affecting them the most. Spain wasn't really hit very bad. They just were able to report about it, It still affected Spain, for sure. But it wasn't nearly as bad, and it definitely did not originate in Spain. It actually originated during World War I from animals and being on close contact with livestock. Another version of this was the swine flu in 2009, which is pretty recent, but hence its name, the swine flu. This was a disease that was spread from animals to humans. And from what I've researched, it's really unclear on how that happened, but I encourage you to further that and tell me if I'm wrong. It really killed off the young and the old. A lot like this coronavirus that's going on right now, or COVID-19, because coronavirus has been going around for a long time, but this new strand, COVID-19, is really attacking the young and the old, similar to this influenza, or Spanish flu. And hygiene, poor medical conditions, caused a super infection of bacteria. They had mass amounts of people in a room at a time, which definitely was not helping their situation, and it wasn't very hygienic at all. So that definitely wasn't very smart of them. The last and final disease I'm going to be talking about is coronavirus, going on right now, COVID-19. I mean, there's not really a ton of information on it, to be honest with you, because it's ongoing. We don't know, exactly when it's going to end, or how many it will affect, or how many it's going to kill. We're all in quarantine. This just started. So we'll see how this goes. But I did find a few histories on the coronavirus, not COVID-19. COVID-19 is a new bacterial or virus strand of the coronavirus. They actually discovered this virus in the 1960s. And 5 new human viruses have been discovered since then concerning this. And actually, my parents, they talked to our doctor, and the doctor said, you've probably had coronavirus at one point in your life, especially when you're a child, but you just didn't know it because it really is kind of like the common flu. But this new strand definitely attacks differently. They don't know how to solve this. They don't know exactly what to do about it because they haven't had experience with this certain strand yet. So it's named coronavirus for how the virus actually appears under a microscope. The coronavirus itself actually attacks the respiratory. It's known to produce a lot of asthma problems in children and chronic bronchitis in adults and elderly, which is really scary because I've heard that this COVID-19 actually causes more respiratory issues if you don't already have them. If you get this virus, it really does damage your lungs. And in 2002 and in 2003, SARS was a smaller epidemic that went around, but it was a strand of coronavirus. SARS stands for Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome. 8,098 were infected, and there is no cure for this still. However, I've heard, not confirmed for sure, but I've heard that this COVID-19 virus can only survive for 4 hours on copper, and mass amounts of alcohol can kill it. However, copper would kill you if you injected it into you, and mass amounts of alcohol that would kill this would also kill you, a human. So again, they're working on it. They're trying to figure this out, but we'll see. So that is all of the world's deadliest diseases throughout history in a trying to be chronological order. I hope you enjoyed this video. It was definitely interesting to make. But yeah, if you enjoyed it, please make sure to subscribe so that I can, keep posting more episodes of History Happens. Comment below for the next topic that you think I should do, or what you're interested. Comment your thoughts. Comment. I love feedback because I'm just starting out. Make sure to like it, and if you want to find out when the next episode happens, you can turn on the notifications bell. And yeah, share this with as many people if you find it interesting. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next episode.